happens in, thank you. Thank you. No, thank you, Danny. Um, we know that housing discrimination is illegal, but it happens, in Metro Detroit area. And so from between 2008 and 2017, there were almost 1,000 incidents that were reported to the Fair Housing Center. And they show that discrimination on the basis of race and or disability was more likely to occur in neighborhoods with low incomes, more renters, and higher proportion of Black and Hispanic residents. And let's see, we're going to let somebody else come in here. It looks like you're going to take care of that, right, Danny? So we're honored today to have Steve Tomkowiak, who specialized in litigation and trial of mortgage lending and fair housing cases for close to 30 years. He served as a course developer and instructor for HUD's National Fair Housing Training Academy in Washington, D.C. And he's spoken at many national, state, and local conferences. And so we're honored today to have Steve to be our speaker for Gray Panthers of Metro Detroit. So take it away, Steve.
All right, thank you, Randy. This is also, I talked to Kathleen yesterday about that. This is Fair Housing Month. April is Fair Housing Month. The Fair Housing Act got passed in April 11th, 1968. And we'll talk a little bit about that too as well. I'm going to do a short little 7-minute clip on that, and you can kind of get the background with that because it connects up with some of the situations we're seeing today. But just real quick introduction of our organization. Again, as you can see on the screen, we're the Fair Housing Center Metropolitan Detroit. We've been, our mission is to facilitate, ensure equal access to housing without regard to discrimination based on any protected class category under federal, state, local anti-discrimination laws and ordinances. We serve Wayne, Oakland, and Macomb. Obviously, a lot of our work is also focused in the city of Detroit. We've added, just recently, our board added St. Clair County, so we're up to 4 counties. The state is, for HUD grant purposes, the state is divided up. All the counties are divided up, and these are the ones that we serve. High population, close to 40%, or over 40% of the state population, even though we have 1 center. There's 3 other centers, but they serve much smaller populations. So again, we make sure that there's free access housing without regard to someone's protected class status. And we do free assistance to those that file fair housing complaints. We do a lot of training. I do upwards of 60 trainings a year, a lot of education and outreach and research. Randy, you mentioned an article that we worked with University of Michigan. That was published article, and that's some of the things that we do. Who enforces the fair housing laws? There are various ways it can be enforced. People can make complaints with the Michigan Department of Civil Rights or HUD. Department of Justice can get involved. It's a pattern and practice case. Though not frequently, they tend to be the largest cases. Any person can bring a claim. It can be a municipality, a company, an individual. But independent fair housing centers, we play a unique role. We're advocacy organizations. We're funded by HUD to receive complaints, investigate them. We also do fair housing testing, which is an important component of what we do. We have testers. We have up to 17 FBI grade recording devices to record what takes place when they seek for housing, not to, quote, get people, but to get an accurate view of what's taking place within the housing market. We can test in response when we receive a complaint from somebody, but we can also do systemic audit testing for areas where, for example, discrimination may be occurring, but people are not likely to bring complaints. For example, we had 7 American Sign Language cases against assisted living facilities. 5 are resolved, 2 are on appeal before the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. So we have authorization at times to actually initiate litigation ourselves. And it shows you how the state gets divided up by the various fair housing centers. And again, we're advocacy organization. If someone makes a complaint to Michigan Department of Civil Rights and HUD, they don't take a side. They're neutral. They investigate and then decide whether there's cause or no cause. The likelihood of finding cause is very, very low. And we assist with that process. We'd better offer people first to go with us, then to go to HUD, Michigan Department of Civil Rights, because we can conduct testing, we can advise people or inform them of their rights. We have a team of cooperating attorneys that take cases on a contingency basis. These are protected class categories. I'll come back to this in a second. Um, since 1977, over 8,000 complaints. You can see the recovery is over $12 million. So you can see many times we resolve cases without the necessity of going forward to trial. These are just some recent decisions that came through our office. You can see the number of them that occurs here. Um, I should show it's free. I represented brother and sister in an eviction case that went all the way up to the Michigan Supreme Court, free of charge. How you can't beat that. And then we also do a lot. You saw in an article about landlord-tenant disputes. We do a lot of work on that as well. Um, I do trainings, webinars, and that dealing with these kinds of issues. And this shows some example, like at the national level on fair housing training. And this is one, for example, on the western part of the state, give you some idea. And people are free to sign up for our fair housing trainings. These are some of our MISTA trainings, like next Tuesday, unlawful lockouts, May 7th, affirmative marketing, and so forth. Hoarding is going to be in July. That's a big issue. Dealing with criminal records and so forth. Lease to own, fraud protection is a real big deal. They will have a webinar on that. They'll all get posted on YouTube. And these are some of the research that we do, articles. And this is the one that you mentioned working with U of M and others on the correlation between racial socioeconomic segregation and incidents of housing discrimination. And here's another one dealing with COVID. We have a bikeathon. The next bikeathon is next Saturday. And we do advertising, outreach, and advocacy. We do get involved in advocating. This is one dealing with, there's a proposed bill dealing with use of criminal record or criminal record policies in rental housing. There's another one dealing with source of income as a protected class. And I want to encourage, always has the opportunity, please, for anybody who wants to do it, you can sign up, go through the training and become a fair housing tester. So please take that into consideration. And people can also, $50 makes you a member of our organization as well. And we're always available to answer questions. If someone thinks that we're just there for people that have been victims or claiming discrimination, that's not completely correct. We serve everybody. If a property management company owner or whatever has a fair housing question, or want training, they can contact our office. We're happy to provide those answers for them. Our board consists of people through a cross section of the housing community. One person is a fair lending officer. Another one had started a 200-member property management company. You get the idea. So it's a cross section of the community. We have someone who's executive director at Southwest Solutions. He's on our board and so forth. So we serve a variety of interests. Our focus is fair housing, and that opens up doors of opportunity for people. It's win-win. Properly understood, properly applied, it's win-win. And sometimes people take fair housing as kind of a negative thing. It's not. Properly understood, it's just not. And when people understand the purpose and why we have fair housing protections, they tend to be more supportive of it. But that's a real quick rundown of it. Let me jump for a little bit here. And I want to go through, I don't know how much time I want to spend on this one, but give me a second. I'll put this slide up here. Just a quick overview. What is fair housing? Let me share it real quick. Let me. Thought I started. Nope. Oh, I see. I already started this slide and then it was, I didn't close out. Okay. So just a real quick overview, fair housing and major protected classes. Can you see it okay? Yes, I think you can. So here's kind of the overview of how we ended up with fair housing. When people think of fair housing, I had an email from an attorney from a big firm, very confused. He wants to do training to those that are involved in retail leasing, basically, and fair housing training, and doesn't see the idea of fair housing training because the Fair Housing Act only deals with residential properties. That's true in terms of the Fair Housing Act. But in terms of uh, discrimination laws, the only one that's limited to residential housing is the Federal Fair Housing Act. Every other civil rights law applies to residential, commercial, across the board. So it's a misunderstanding. And basically, he took the position, well, like implied, didn't come out and say it that way, but implied that, well, there's discrimination when it comes to rental and that, but when it comes to retail, like commercial office leases and things like that, there's not discrimination there, right? As though there's discrimination in employment, voting, education, housing, all of these kinds of things, but there's no discrimination taking place in commercial real estate. Like nonsense. I just say, but that's the way people think. It's just amazing to me. So here's the quick rundown. Congress passed the 13th Amendment got passed, which freed slaves. What happened? Didn't work. So as a result, Congress passed the Civil Rights Acts of 1866 and 70. And it's codified at 42 United States Code sections 1981, 1982. Section 1981 deals with contract rights. So freed slaves or people on the basis of race and color would have the opportunity to enter into contracts. A lease is a contract, a mortgage is a contract, employment is a contract. Those are all contracts. Section 1982 dealt with property rights, the right to inherit, lease, sell, hold, convey real and personal property. The problem is that law sat for 100 years. It was only viewed as reaching purely private governmental action, not purely private housing transactions. It wasn't until Jones versus Alfred Mayer, 1968, 3 months after the Fair Housing Act got adopted, that Congress or that Supreme Court ruled that Section 1982 reaches purely private housing transactions. So, anyways, the Fair Housing Act got passed in 1968, April 11th, and the Rehabilitation Act got passed in 1973. So we're just over, I'm going to do 2 and 2 with that. And Michigan, you can see, had their fair housing laws, got adopted in 1976. The key thing here is the Fair Housing Act got amended in 1988 to cover familial status and disability. And then the ADA, American Disability Act, was passed in 1990. Some people think that ADA is the dominant law, Fair Housing Act secondary. Really not so. The ADA is actually modeled after the Fair Housing Act. Civil rights is it's difficult to advance civil rights. Had a series of hearings in Pontiac for them to adopt source of income, which they finally did. There was a big battle over exemptions in that, but it never, ever, ever comes easy. At one meeting, landlords just packed city council room opposing that legislation. There's not been any civil rights law, fair housing protection that hasn't been opposed by the real estate industry or landlord groups. It's never happened. It's never come easy. No civil rights has ever been passed peacefully. I'm going to show you a real quick clip. Hopefully you can hear it. If you can't hear it, let me know and I'll just move on. But this shows the 7 days leading up to the passage of the Fair Housing Act. Congress considered fair housing legislation they passed the Civil Rights, Title VII Civil Rights Act, addressing employment discrimination. For Title VIII deals with housing discrimination. And after that got passed, it took 3 years, and really it was more of a debate about anti-rioting legislation, till finally the Dirksen report came out in early 1968 saying America was going to two societies, separate and unequal. As a result, then the Senate grabbed the House bill, started really to actively debate on it. It got bogged down until King got assassinated. Then the Senate passed the bill, sent it over to the House. And so this deals with those 7 days leading up to the passage of the Fair Housing Act. Let me know if you have any trouble hearing this. That's not good. It's not playing. Let me see here. Give me a second. Let's see if I can. Okay, got it. What do you think?
land. And indeed, this
But it's not really playing well. Oh, it's too bad. No, it's not playing. Okay, oh, I can do it this way. I did set it up. I set it up on a separate, let me see if you can hear it this way. I'm gonna do a separate share. Tell me if you hear this better.
few in the nation believe that fair housing would, in our time, become the of this land. And indeed, this bill has had a long and stormy trip.
I think because I'm on a,
We got some difficulties.
all right,
Like anybody, I would like to live a long life, long time.
so what I'm gonna do is make sure that you can hear me here. All right, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna it's like I lost my slide here.
Well, we can hear you.
Yeah. I'm not seeing, can you still hear me okay? You can still hear me okay?
Yep, definitely can see you
All right, let
and
me
hear,
try it here.
and hear you.
I think you can hear me now, correct?
Can hear you.
Can you hear me now? Okay, great. All right. Let me go through these. These are a quick one. 1981 deals with contract rights. You can see that. 1982 or 1982 deals with at the top deals with property rights. You can see how basic people think of fair housing. They think of the Fair Housing Act. They really should think of sections 1981, 1982. Those are actually the bedrock fair housing laws. Deals with residential, commercial, any kind of property, any kind of contracts. So it's all inclusive. Fair Housing Act has 7 protected class categories, an acronym, fair, fresh corn. Michigan has it as well. You can see the Michigan Person with Disability Civil Rights Act and Michigan Elliott Larson. It adds a couple ones that you don't have federally. It adds age, marital status, sexual orientation, gender identity and expression just got added. And there's local ordinances. I have Detroit and Pontiac. You can see those are listed there. Detroit has public benefit status, height and weight. It doesn't have the source of income per se, but really it's interpreted the same way. And why did Congress, here's the question, why did Congress pass the Fair Housing Act when it already had civil rights legislation under sections 1981 dealing with contract rights and 1982 dealing with property rights? Well, first, they weren't clear that the sections 1982 reached purely private housing transactions. And that ended up becoming clear when Jones came out. The Fair Housing Act also includes additional categories that weren't covered under sections 1981 and 1982, sex, national origin, disability, and familial status. But here's the key thing. The Fair Housing Act includes affirmative provisions. In other words, the key thing here is a right for persons to ask for a reasonable accommodation and reasonable modification. You don't get that under purely anti-discrimination statutes. There's also a design and construction requirement for new multifamily housing developments. Any housing development that has 4 or more units that are attached must be built in compliance with design and construction requirements. In other words, must be handicap accessible. And if it has an elevator, then all the units. If it doesn't have an elevator, then the ground floor has to be meet accessibility requirements. That's a real important one. And here's a real key one: requirement for HUD grant recipients to firmly further fair housing. When we say fair housing, all of us think, well, that's good. It stops discrimination and it will integrate communities. Actually, it doesn't. Anti-discrimination is not the same thing as integration. There's no affirmative steps to be taken. It's the kind of assumption that if you stop people from discriminating, then we're just naturally going to integrate. That just has not happened and is still not happening. But what there is with affirmatively furthering fair housing, any recipient of federal funds must administer those funds in a way that affirmatively furthers fair housing. That requirement sat from 1968 to 1995 before HUD finally started to take steps to make sure that that affirmatively furthering fair housing requirement was being met. So that now that it is in place, but it's really a hot political one like you wouldn't imagine. But what it does, it says that, what are people doing with home funds, HUD funds? And if they're administering those funds, it attaches to all their activities to make sure that they're doing things to take down barriers to fair housing. And that is a key component. We all need to weigh in when those housing plans are being developed. That's required at the state level, local level, Detroit, the state of Michigan, counties do them as well. So that's a real key component of the Fair Housing Act that you don't have under the other laws. When does the ADA apply? It only applies to place of public accommodation limited to 12 categories. It's not a broad law that applies across the board. Again, those are place of public accommodation. Largely does not deal with residential housing, only place of public accommodation. So there is an overlap between the Fair Housing Act and the ADA, but largely they deal with different issues. Just to make it real short is if at apartment complex, condominium association, if they have a community room, if the community room is available to tenants and their guests, it's only subject to the Fair Housing Act. If the community room is able to be used by who? Anybody, the public, then it's also subject to the ADA. The parking lot would not be subject to the ADA if the parking lot is only for the residents and their guests. But if, for example, there's a rental office there that's open to the public, then the ADA would also apply. Fair Housing Act would also apply because that parking lot area is also used for residential housing. So that's kind of the overlap with it. I'm not going to go into detail with this. Section 504 also has accessibility standards which apply for any programs that involve federal financial assistance. And so you can see, and here's some of the other protected class categories at the local level. And the risks, obviously, under federal law, there can be punitive damages. Under state law, there can be compensatory damages as well as injunctive relief. The point is not to make a major case. The point is to get people in compliance. So what new development, sex discrimination, that's actually been the policy of HUD in cases going back to 2014. It's just gotten more attention. You can see under the Bostock decision. So HUD's always recognized, you can see some of the earlier cases mentioned here. In Michigan, Public Act 6 of the new legislature back in 2023 added sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression. But Rauch World had followed Bostock, saying that Michigan Supreme Court, the employment provision in Elliott Larson was interpreted to be consistent with Title VII. And so discrimination and employment discrimination on grounds of sex encompasses sexual orientation. And so the idea is if it's whether it's sexual orientation, gender identity, or just sex, whatever, it's all based on someone's sex, sexual orientation, gender identity. It all counts and it all fits under sex discrimination, whether or not the act has been amended. Again, Michigan has amended it to include it. That has not occurred yet at the federal level. But again, courts are already interpreting it that way. The big thing is, oh yeah, Michigan also has a Crown Act dealing with hairstyles often associated with race. So it's been included within Michigan. It's not been adopted at the federal level. There's been a big movement on Crown Acts. Source of income is a big one. It just got adopted. We worked really hard to get that adopted. In Pontiac, there is, you can see the states or the count, Michigan doesn't have it nationally. When the Fair Housing Act got adopted, 22 states had adopted fair housing legislation. Here we have 23 states that have adopted source of income protections, yet it has not been adopted at the federal level. There is source of income protection when it comes to Equal Credit Opportunity Act and lending transactions, but none when it comes to housing. Michigan doesn't have it. It's pending. There's Michigan bills pending on the House and Senate. I think there was I was out of town on a fair housing conference, but there was a hearing Thursday in Michigan. Thursday or Friday? Friday, maybe Friday morning. My conference was Friday morning. You can see in Michigan, the local ordinances up to 15 cities. Pontiac is great because it has a private right of action. So those are just the main thing. But I want to jump here to what are the priorities? What are the real concerns? And I've got a few of them, and it lines with your organization actually. I did this for a HUD grant, but so I didn't like change this for you guys. I just grabbed it, put it on a separate document so you can see it. It's kind of shocking. What are the real concerns here? First, we're still talking about this in 2024. Persistently high segregation and isolation. Right, Michigan black and brown population is around 14%, 65% residing in our area here. Believe it or not, there's a dissimilarity index with 0 being perfect integration, 100 being perfect segregation. Anything over 50% is bad. It's just not very good. The Metro Detroit MSA area ranks 3rd nationwide, dissimilar index of 74.5%. Stunningly, the segregation index has increased from 2010 to 2020. So we're going the wrong way. I don't know what to say about that. Don't know what to say about that. You know, Southfield, oh, pretty good, right? You know, I don't know, 70 some percent black residents in Southfield. But yet, if you take a look at the school systems, the 2 school systems in Southfield, then you're going to see black, brown, one part, and the other part is not. But here's another one. There's also measured by level of isolations, and that's the minority percentage in the neighborhood where the average minority group member lives. Our Metro Detroit MSA ranks 1st in the nation. It's terrible, right? So we do have a segregation problem. You do not hear a lot of reports about this, sadly. We do have disparities in home ownership rates. It's stunning that from the Fair Housing Act got passed in 1968. Again, there was fair housing law previously, back to 1866 and 70. It wasn't really understood to reach purely private housing transactions, of course, but it did. So 1981, 1982 began to be used, as well as Fair Housing Act back in 1968. They didn't study racial disparities in home ownership rates until 1970. So what happened is between 1970 and 2002, the home ownership rates increased nationwide from 26.4 to 29%. That's good. But what happened, they found is the actual disparity between black, white home ownership rates did not reduce. It slightly increased from 1970 to 2022. Now, I have some of the data here in Michigan. I don't have the, I have national data I can show you as well. And that's really shocking. The Black or white Hispanic rate narrowed just a bit, but it basically means in 55 years of fair housing, the disparity has not reduced. It's hard to wrap your mind around it. I do think policies are a factor. I think there's a number of things that lead to that, whether it's education, breakdown of the family structure. There's a number of things that are contributing to that. Uh, there's also, I have updated data more current than this, but this is still pretty close. Uh, there's been an increase. I can show you those data if you want to see it. But we basically have two types of families as well. We have a home ownership family and we have a rental family. They're two different worlds, two different groups in terms of net worth. The median net worth for a home ownership family was $255,000. I think that's been increased with inflation and the home prices. I think it's over $300,000 now. And for a rental household was only $6,300. The mean or average net worth was $1 million compared to $95,000. So the net worth, a mean net worth or average net worth disparity between a home ownership household and a renter household is $1 million. I don't know what to say. And it correlates with educational achievement, health outcomes, all the things that we talked about. We have discrimination in appraisal practices, home disparities between homes in Black, brown neighborhoods in Detroit metropolitan statistical area is reduced by 31.9%, a dollar difference of $35,000 in comparison to homes in majority non-minority neighborhoods. This is a priority nationwide as well as at the state level. The problem is, without getting into a lot of detail, the law has made it very, very difficult. It may be shocking, but there's been only, in the history of fair housing, 6 appraisal cases that went to trial. The plaintiff lost every single time. There's similar numbers like that when it comes to lending discrimination as well. Another key factor, and this goes across the nation as well, is that Michigan's population is rapidly aging. And persons 65 and over comprise from 16.6% to 20% in Wayne, Oakland, and Macomb counties. And they got estimates at the state level as well. But here's the thing, estimated 1/3 of persons 65 and over have at least one disability, and nearly 1/2 of people 74 and over have a disability. And the disability rates for Black and Native American rates are even higher. This population, aging population, need assistance with reasonable accommodations and modifications, including visual alerts, smoke alarms, high-speed internet for video phones, and so forth. And that's a real priority. We spend a chunk of our time working on reasonable accommodations and modifications for people that have disabilities, quite a people who are elderly. It's really important for people to age in place, especially with the price of housing, and as the people can't afford to relocate, right? They get hammered with real estate taxes and so forth. We have a big problem with overbroad criminal record policies. Detroit has a fair chance ordinance, but it was okay at the time, but looking now at it, it's not a very good policy. They have pending legislation at the state level to establish a statewide criminal record policy. But the result of this is just stunning. Formerly incarcerated individuals are nearly 10 times more likely to experience homelessness or housing insecurity. 1 in 5 persons leaving prison become homeless thereafter. And persons with unstable or up to 7 times more unstable housing are 7 times more likely to reoffend. In Michigan, 12 to 16% of Black adults have felony convictions in comparison to 3 and 4% for all adults. I saw one report showed that Black males, 33% of Black males have a felony in their record. If the policies are overbroad in terms of someone's criminal record policy, right, it will, when that policy gets applied, it will result in adverse treatment or discriminatory effect against Black applicants. We've had cases where someone had a conviction dating back 32 years, got out of prison, got a degree from Wayne State, got hired by the state of Michigan, worked with the state of Michigan for about 5, 6 years, then did other work. And then at the age of 72, 30 plus years after the felony conviction, was turned down for housing because of his criminal record. It was a condominium association which said when you sublease, the person you sublease to cannot have a felony or misdemeanor conviction, period, regardless of how many years back it goes. No one's saying that you rent to someone who's a threat or you sell to someone who's a threat. No. But if they're not a legitimate threat, you should rent your home. You should rent the unit. You could sell the home, right? But again, I was shocked too looking at this data. The most recent, I think this was 2023 data, I believe. Michigan's most recent felony arrest data. Black persons comprise 14.1% of Michigan's population, but 36.9% of all arrests. So we still have this disparity in arrests that are occurring today. There's language barriers as well. Wayne, Oakland counties are the top two, limited English proficiency languages in the state of Michigan. We're unique in our area because Arabic is our second most common language. Spanish is third. Most areas, Spanish would be second, right? But not in our area. Here's one. You kind of guys alluded to it earlier. There's a concern with vulnerable populations, working poor, minorities, Native Americans, persons with disabilities, elderly, and homeless. Michigan has a housing plan which lists those same type of populations. If, when you, someone said, well, we assist people, not just fair housing, but other kinds of fair housing issues, maybe disputes about security deposits and things like that. But the people that we serve are often one step away from being homeless, or they may be homeless and they can't because they have a prior conviction on their record, or I'm sorry, prior eviction on their record, or the previous landlord claims that they owe $1,500 or something like that. So we work hard to address those issues, analyze it, see if there's other kinds of landlord tenant claims that can be asserted to show that there is no balance owing. So that's a real concern there, so that people can then get housing. A real factor in this is, I'm going to show one. I have it on evictions. I don't want to go over time-wise for you. I want to show you something, just how stark this is. I did, hopefully I can then. Let's see if I can pull it up here. Let me show you just some of this, the gap in affordable housing. We're dealing really with the severely low income, extremely low income rental households. And look at what happens here. There are, if you look within that population group, right, for extremely low income, 11 million households are extremely low income, but there's only 7 million units available for them to live. I stopped asking people why they moved into a unit when the repairs weren't done. Because you get the same thing. There's nothing else available. There was nothing that we can do. Why are you putting up with these things not being taken care of? Because I have no place else to go. There's nothing that people can do. They are trapped. They are exploited. The sad part is it's even getting to the point where people are now doing shared living arrangements. Imagine sharing a room in a home. And you can think about they feel like they can charge $400, $500, which doesn't sound like much compared to a regular rental rate, but yet the home is packed by bedrooms. So it ends up being they're getting $3,000, $4,000 a month by packing people into a home. It's so sad. But if you go at the higher income levels, then there's much more housing available. If you look at the 6.8 million households at very low income, they can afford approximately 16.2 million units. So they can find housing. There's some housing available. It's the extremely low income that have basically no place to go. And it shows it by state. Michigan, I think it was 35, now it's 36 units, still not very good. Like we're not a very good state. And then here's kind of the number on it. You can kind of compare it, right? And homes increase with income. But I want to show you this because the presumption is that, well, someone in substandard housing or someone that falls into homelessness, they don't try hard. This shows within that group really breaks down some of it's like anything. We just have kind of presuppositions that we bring to the table. Look at the extremely low income households. 35% are in the labor force. Majority of them are working. And of that group that are working, 39% are working more than 40 hours a week. 39, 30, you can see. And then many are seniors. Others are disabled. Isn't that something? So it cries out for something to be done. We need to increase the supply of affordable housing. It just has to be done. Like now, yesterday. There is no economic incentive. I don't want to promote the government as the answer to everything, but this one, there's no choice. If the government does not step in and do something to increase the supply of affordable housing for very low income renter households, extremely low income households, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to say. And it shows it as well. And you know what the sad part is? Maybe it's not surprising, but there's a racial component to it. If you look at the households of color, more likely than white households to be renters and have extremely low incomes. Isn't that something? Look at the extremely low income renters. In the Black population, it's 19%, almost 20% are extremely low income. How many are homeowners? Only 43%. And on the right, Asian, white populations, much more likely to be homeowners, far less likely to be extremely low income renters. This really graphically illustrates the problem. So, I mean, that's how I view the world. I view it in terms of income levels and also view it in terms of race and protected class categories. And underlying this is, right, who would fit within that 19% extremely low income? Often they're single family head of households. There's families with children. If this was all, and then I want to show you one more thing. Michigan is stunning in terms of our eviction rate. We're horrible. Nationwide, it's, I got you guys there. It's 1 in 17 households, approximately 6 to 7%. This was a big study on it, a 5-year period. In Michigan, 1 in 6 or 17% eviction rate in Michigan. Look at by county. Isn't that stunning? Just stunning. We did analysis impediments for Clinton Township, and it was over 30%, even though it's not listed here, an estimate. Current data as of 2022, 2023. But look at that. It's stunning. We got an eviction factory in our state. And it correlates with what? 95% statistical level with Black families, single mothers, and families with children. Isn't that shocking? Black households always more likely to risk eviction. I want to show you this one. Look at this one. Younger adults. Look at this. Young adults. More likely to say they've been treated differently in their search for housing. That's sad. Look at the young adults. If homeownership is really a possibility. Very, very alarming. So there's a lot to do. There's a lot to do. Let me come
Steve,
back.
I know there's a huge universe of things that you're talking about. And I guess what my request is if you have any recommendations about top priorities for action, because we are a social justice group. And I did hear you saying we definitely need more money, government funding to make affordable housing, particularly for people who are in high discrimination groups or low income groups. what are the two or three things that you would say that we really need to be setting as priorities? Because we can't solve everything. We're just one group.
Good point, right? You can't solve everything. You can't solve everything. Uh, I would like to see your group. Well, of course, we could always use testers. If anybody's interested in testing, you can go on our website, fairhousingdetroit.org, or 313-579-FAIR, and then sign up, to even if you want information on it, at least, inquire about testing. But yes, there is a need for affordable housing. There's a lot of components to it. Often there's zoning barriers in that to fair housing. For example, setback requirements, square footage requirements, makes it very, very difficult to build a small home. That's one option. Often municipalities are resistant to the 6, 8, 10, 12 unit buildings, which really help because they will get low income properties, but yet not really change the character and nature of the municipality. That's a crucial one. The only ones that get through are the 300, 200, 300, 400 unit buildings that have a team of architects, attorneys, and so forth to ram it through. And that contributes to people claiming about, well, they don't want the multifamily unit in here because, well, because that changes the whole character and nature of the building. And some of it is absurd. Somebody complained that the development would block her view of Myers, and that was sufficient for a planning commission to deny development. I just because they don't want it. But if every community does their share, not just dump it in the low income communities, but spread it about evenly. Um, I would like you to support source of income being adopted. That's a big one. From your group, that would be very, very helpful. Advocate for source of income and why it's a good thing. Source of income really
Is there,
protects
I'm going
low-income
to interrupt,
families.
I'm going to interrupt you, Steve, but when you say advocate for source of income, is there like legislation or is there a policy that is being put forth by your organization or by others that we could know where to start with that?
Legislation. There's pending legislation. Pending legislation at the state level.
What would that be then?
Express support for it.
No, I mean, I'm asking what is the legislation?
Well, here's the legislation would protect people. It would protect people with vouchers. It will protect people with FHA, VA financing. Sometimes low-income people who, to get into home ownership, have that type of financing, and people don't want to sell to someone who's getting FHA financing.
I'm still asking for if there is something specific there as opposed to the broad purposes that you're talking about. But
yeah, that would be expressing level of support for it, and if necessary, providing testimony. That would be very, very helpful for your organization to do that.
I'm going to open this up.
I don't think they hear from our organizations on the fair housing side, right? And I think certainly they hear from the real estate industry. But I think your group is a little different, right? You're a little different in terms of your group, and I think that may get a little bit more attention than some of the other groups would. I think you're kind of unique in terms of your mission.
Well,
right? Because you're not in the housing industry. You're not per se in fair housing in that kind of a sense. But you're saying that is important. Certainly it's important. It's important for elderly population, many, frequently a priority, right? For elderly disabled to receive vouchers. And you don't want, I mean, without source of income protection, someone can say no Section 8, period, and housing is foreclosed. So when we talk about, you not only have a shortage of housing, but if we have people not accepting voucher, that even makes housing even less available to low-income families. That's a real major concern. There are people that have vouchers that can't get housing. even though they have a voucher.
Yeah, well, I'm hearing a lot about the problem, and what I'm trying to still fish for, and I'm going to basically say, let's open this up to other people because I'm afraid my mouth has been open too much right now. But I am sort of fishing for if there was something specific other than the problem would be what if there's a piece of legislation or that's being promoted by an advocacy group. But I'd like to just open it to other people so other people
you
have a
want-
chance to ask their questions.
Somebody put in the House bills numbers 4063 and Senate, yeah, both of them, Senate Bill 205 to 207. So those are the specific bills. I can get those for you.
House Bill
I can pull them up
403
if you
and
want.
Senate Bill 205, 207.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Who else would like to ask a question for our speaker today? Okay, I see Dave Ivers.
More of just a comment. I learned very recently, I thought the fossil fuel was a big one in the pharmacy. The largest lobbyist in Washington is the Real Estate Association, the largest lobbyist. So I understand you're up against the creek here, but it's an important thing. I'm disappointed at how poorly we're doing nationally. I really thought we were better than most, and it hurts.
There's things I haven't shared. Right. We all think we're fine. We're not. For example, Iowa does better than us. You know, they if a landlord doesn't have a rental certificate, there's automatic rent abatement. I've proposed that. And Pontiac did it where people can now pay it into escrow if the landlord doesn't have a rental certificate. The unregistered properties went down from 7,000 to 1,000. And of those 1,000, actions are taking to get the property properly registered with the repairs done. And repairs are not onerous. Those are simply repairs, basic things that are required anyways under Michigan law. We need late fee regulation. Sad to say, capping late fees at 5%. Sometimes these are incremental little steps, but all of these things will combine to reduce the homeless population. It'll stabilize families and communities. The criminal record is one where there's a bill pending on use of criminal record. I think you could help with that as well. I can pull it up here. I can pull it up if you want the numbers and that, but I can get those over to you. Again, with the Democrats back in the majority in the Michigan House, that now these things are going to be moving forward rather rapidly. I see criminal record. It's House Bill 4878. And then on source of income, it's been proposed several times. I may have it in a separate one. I got so many things here on source of income, but I'll get those for you. I don't have it here.
I'm seeing that Kathleen has got her hand up and she also put something in the chat.
Hi, yes. I did want to know if you might be able to speak briefly about becoming a fair housing tester and what that entails. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Testing, it's roughly a 2-hour class, and there's a testing guide that you go through, and then you get trained to do it, and you do tests. Some of the tests, you do a written report. Other tests, there's a recording device that you receive. You tag in, you do the test, and then you tag out. It's FBI grade device. That's a little bit easier because then you don't have to you don't have to prepare a report like that. But basically, you go out there and like a mystery shopper would be how people would refer to that as. And you go out there and you have a script in terms of your income and your background. You may be searching for housing for yourself, or you may be searching for housing for someone in your family. And then you just do an accurate record of what takes place when you go out there and inquire. That's it. You're not out to get anybody. You're just out to get an accurate recorder, memorialize what took place, what you were told, what units were made available to you or not. And there can also be testing in mortgage lending, insurance, any kind of housing type or housing related transaction. Now, some of the tests are done where you do it individually. There's a number of tests that are just telephone tests, so you could do it from at home, and it works at your schedule. You can do as many or few of tests that you want, so you can fit it right into your schedule when you're available to do the test. That's really, really, really valuable evidence. Testers are unsung heroes in the civil rights movement. Most don't realize, but we also test in public accommodation, so we're not limited to just housing. We will test whether it's a hotel or other type of place where there's a claim of discrimination. We will test that as well.
Do we
So
have
yeah,
any
testing is
other,
a real key component.
do we have any other questions from the folks that were on the call today? I see Kaya Davidson's hand up.
Yeah, hi.
Myself. Okay. I wonder if you could speak about policies of various municipalities. I live in Farmington Hills, and our city has discussed fair or affordable housing, but they also have a policy of not approving plans by developers to build apartments, which cuts out most affordable housing. So I don't know about other cities. Can you speak to that?
Same. That's the same.
Yeah.
There's a leading fair housing advocate, Sarah Pratt, or maybe some else, but basically she said, well, our city is all built up. Not really. There's always housing opportunities available, right? Something gets demolished or whatever, it gets converted. There are housing opportunities. But again, they're thinking that it's going to be a major change in the community and they oppose it. Now, that may be at the city council level, whatever, but you can see within some of the building departments, right? They have people that know, hey, we need to do this. Someone gave me an anecdotal report. I guess you could say now it's not in office, but Mayor Fouts said, no, basically don't give me any multifamily housing. I'm going to reject it. Don't even put it on my desk. Okay. And it was frustrating to the building department because they want to do it. They want to know what they can do. So we do get questions like that. Some of those, right, that's just wrong. That's discriminatory because it would affect low income, predominantly minority. The city of Berkeley is developing the Columbia, and those are studio and 1-bedroom apartments. Do you see a problem with that? I do, because there's 2 steps that they're not doing right. Number one, by restricting only to studio and 1-bedroom units, they're making those housing units available to families. Any family with family of 2, 3, 4, they can't live there. Not even an option. The other thing which city council needs to do is have set aside units for low income persons. Detroit needs to do that. That's a real big thing. But for Farmington to say we're not going to approve any kind of multifamily, when yeah, I say multifamily, they say apartment. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be an apartment. It could be a townhome, could be a variety of different things. But to flat out say no, that's wrong. That's wrong. They applaud anybody who wants to do a 2, 4, 6, 8, 12 unit building because it's very difficult, from a cost standpoint to really make that viable, unfortunately, with the cost to build homes today. But the city should be working in that direction, not the other way. That's just wrong. That may be something our office should do, get some developers in that and test that out. I have on our Michigan grant a proposed ordinance, which I don't have the expertise to get into specifics on zoning ordinance, but I know some people that really do have that expertise to kind of think through and come up with a model ordinance that cities could adopt. When we did the analysis for Clinton Township, again, it's such a difficult question. It's very technical and complicated, but they adopted our analysis of impediments and agreed to set up a commission to look at zoning reform. That's another option that the city would have. So I'm not saying the city council wants to take that on right now and adopt some ordinance to deal with this. But that would be a good situation where they should set up a committee and a team of, cross section of people from the community and find out what they can do to facilitate that. That I think is where the answer lies, not Detroit taking on the whole responsibility for affordable housing, or, Pontiac because they have extra land available or whatever, every community should do their share. Again, what's the backdrop of this? We are third in the nation on segregation, and it's increasing. Stunningly, it's increasing. And we're number one in the nation in racial isolation. And we think, oh, we're in Michigan, we're doing pretty good. Okay. I didn't make the numbers up. I didn't do the data research. Others did. And we come out looking not so good. And I know all about the history in that. And that's why we're here where we are. Okay. But that gets old as an explanation of it when we were making progress and now we're going the other way.
Okay, do we
So-
have any other questions or comments here for Steve? Okay, I see Jim.
Well, a couple things. I moved from South Lyon, which is as white as you can get, and I moved into Redford. I've been here for 12 years. I love it. I have the much better neighbors than I had when I was in South Lyon. My street is about half white and half black. City's half white and half black. More black than white. And part of what we have to do is actually do something, and I know I'm patting my own back, but I moved to an integrated city and they have great services. There's great people here. And, everyone, we all talk about it, but, it's like, I could have stayed in South Lyon, right? I could live in West Bloomfield where I grew up. I could be in Bloomfield Hills. I could be in Farmington and talk about, blah, 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 blah. We need more integration. Well, if you need integration, why don't you move? And, you can move to Redford and sell your house in Farmington Hills or West Bloomfield or whatever, and probably pocket a few $100,000 extra and, be living in something that's integrated. And so, and the other thing is we have these houses that are way, way, way too big to us. We talk about, a studio or one bedroom. You can't have that many children or whatever. You can put a lot more people in a house than what we do now. I grew up in 1,400 square foot house in West Bloomfield. We had 7 people. We always had plenty of space. And that's the way it was back then. And now everyone has to have however many bedrooms. And, I think we're very, very spoiled in very many ways. That's all I have to say.
Okay,
I
we got
agree.
time for one more question or one more comment.
Well, I follow what Jim said because I think that we need to elevate, lift up, the value of living in an integrated community. There's a Supreme Court decision, Trafficante, where white plaintiffs sued that because of the apartment complex's discriminatory policy, they were denied the professional and personal benefit of living in an integrated community. Isn't that great? They said they were confined to a white ghetto. I love that decision, Trafficante. Isn't that wonderful? We don't. And I see, I get alarmed, like a university level. Well, they want a white graduation, black graduation. Like we're going back those days and safe spaces. No. Integrated areas are unsafe. Let's go for it. Let's be around people different than us with different views than us that challenge us, that broaden our perspectives. But that's the value. I live in Oak Park. It's integrated, I got a black family. I couldn't, I wanted to find an integrated community, and that was not easy to do. And now I got to Oak Park. I love it. I'd never go. But I could have moved out. Yeah, I don't know. I agree with you. I just do. And I think we need to let other people know. And we need to acknowledge people that do the right thing in terms of civil rights. Real estate agents, others that just go the extra mile, put their career on the line to help somebody who's being discriminated against, they need to be recognized as well. But yes, we need to show the value of that. I'm proud of our integration. I just think it's a wonderful thing. I think we all, I mean, I don't know anybody can disagree with that. I don't. I really don't. And there are, I don't know South Lyon specifically, but I know Northville, they said, what can we do to integrate? They're real concerned. Huntington Woods is very concerned. They have a problem with these pocket listings. But they say, what can we do to increase minorities to want to live in our city because they go to Bloomfield Hills. They're not thinking about Huntington Woods and what can we do? At least they have it on the table and they're thinking about what they can do about it. So that should be a priority for all of them. Not to say, let's forget. I know Jim's not saying that. But yes, I want, Redford, Farmington Hills, even South Lyon, all the areas to be really inclusive because that makes them better communities.
Well, thank you.
Big issues, yeah, but we have to deal with these. Otherwise, we're going to back in a situation like segregation increasing. That's just, I don't know. That should bother all of us.
I guess we'll have one more question, Dave Ivers.
As much a comment as anything else. My wife and I have been in our condo. We're in a 40-unit condo at 15 in Shaner, in Clinton Township, and we needed to go to a one-story home, and we wanted to buy something in Grosse Pointe, St. Clair Shores. I wanted the River House in Detroit, but my wife said no to that. But the reality is we couldn't find a one-story out there. We had to go further north to get it. And the condo in now is a 40-unit. When we moved in 10 years ago, there wasn't any person of color in it. And now I think out of the 40 units, I think there's 4 or 5, maybe even 6 Black families. And some of the more active people in the condo, as far as volunteering, are people of color. So I mean, it's something that's been an absolute positive thing for this family, this condo. But my biggest disappointment is that there isn't the housing for how do I say this, for lower middle class people in Detroit that want one story, want one story. Thanks.
Okay. Well, thanks so much for everybody especially for our speaker today, Steve. We thank you. Let's all give Steve our love and appreciation for us coming in on Saturday and sharing some pretty important stuff. And then also for those of you who are part of asking questions or sharing what's going on with you, let's thank all of us here for being part of this discussion. So we're going to be doing a little after this meeting, Steve, and you're more than welcome to sit in on the rest of our meeting because we will be having a whole range of other topics that we'll be discussing from now until noon today. So we got another 50 minutes of heavy duty conversations on big issues of the day. But thank you so much then, Steve, for being here.
Yeah, I'll listen in so I can get an idea of, more in terms of your organization and that. I think I need to know a little bit more. So if you don't mind.
Sure, then you've accepted that invite.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, we're going to have an agenda that includes I'll just give the overview of what's on our agenda for the rest of our meeting. And those of you who are on the board, you would have a copy of this, but we'll give a little update on what's happening with our National Council of Gray Panther Networks. An update from Rich Peacock about some of the funding for Ukraine and Israel, which may be up for a vote even today. Then Dave will be talking about Social Security. That's another kind of big priority issue that's has pits against the conservatives, against people who really value Social Security. Little update, a little announcement about Earth Day, some more information about what's happening with voting rights, and some new bills that just got passed here in the Senate here this week having to do with contraception, so reproductive justice. But other than that, it's a pretty small agenda, just being tongue in cheek there. But I'll just start out by mentioning that with our National Council of Gray Panther Networks, that we had invited people to be, let's see, so with the National Council, I think I've mentioned that we're also talking about Social Security. We've got also the conversation about global warming, which certainly affects a lot of us here every single day. And reproductive justice are three of the items we'll be meeting coming up on the 29th of April. So we're still in the process of putting that agenda together. So we're now at the point at which Reverend Rich Peacock, who's been an amazing peace activist over the years, will give us some perspective, some his thoughts about the updates on funding for Ukraine and Israel. Those are some pretty big topics at the national level. So, Rich.
Thank you, Randy. And I found my T-shirt, so this is good. Looking up. I want to begin and end by referring you to the peaceactionmish.org website, because it has on there right up front, quote, click here to find your congressperson, end quote. You can click there and you can get the telephone numbers and the websites of our senators and your representatives so easily so that you can contact them. So that's peaceactionmish.org. First, some good news. It seems that Israel and Iran have stalled their escalation of firing missiles into each other's land. That has been something that hasn't happened, but now has happened. And it raises the concern of a broader Middle East war. It looks like with the latest couple of shots that they are not increasing the violence. And maybe President Biden had a role in restraining Prime Minister Netanyahu from larger bombings. I know he counseled that, and maybe that worked, who knows. But some good news, it looks like there's not going to be more tit for tat right now. From April 9 to 19, Peace Action, the National Peace Action, organized 40 affiliates across the country to lobby our people in members of Congress. And we had at least 600 people contacting Congress via phone, Zoom, email, and in person. And we were asking people in Congress to publicly call for three things: an immediate and permanent ceasefire. The problem is members of Congress will go for an immediate, but they don't want a permanent ceasefire. So that's where we have to keep working. We asked members of Congress to publicly call for the suspension of all offensive weapons deliveries to Israel. No more offensive weapons for Israel. That was our second ask. Thirdly, we asked our members of Congress to publicly call for the restoration of funds to UNRWA. The United Nations organization is the chief delivery of humanitarian aid, and despite the controversy over last fall, nations like France and Sweden have begun to send funds again to UNRWA, and the United States should. So that's what we were asking. Frankly, we didn't get positive responses, except from Rashida Tlaib. That's the only positive response. And the overall picture is that the military industrial congressional complex is winning. They had a big win yesterday. In the House of Representatives, there was a procedural vote to bring items to the floor for a vote. It looks like this Saturday afternoon. So the three things that are most concerned is $26 billion for Israel, $61 billion for Ukraine, including $23 billion for weapons, and $8 billion for Indochina, Taiwan. And the vote to go ahead and vote on these later today was 316 to 94. The only person who voted against those ideas was Rashida Tlaib. So it's important to keep up the pressure on to do away with more offensive weapons to Israel. They don't need any more military aid. So if you want to do something, that's the stance to take. I looked this morning, and my representative John James, his basic position is we have to stand by Israel. Well, to stand by Israel means to limit their military aggression. So it looks like the Military Industrial Congressional Congress will win again this afternoon. Nevertheless, keep contacting members of Congress. And the easiest way is peaceactionmish.org. Click here to find your congressperson. Thank you. We'll see if there's some comments or questions.
I see that Lon Herman, are you still on the call? He had his hand up for a second there.
Yeah.
Well, oh yeah, there's Lon. Did you still want to ask a question, Lon, or make a comment? One of my questions is that included in that bill that's to be voted on, they had several $billions for humanitarian aid. And oh yeah, Lon, did you want to offer a comment?
Yeah, I wanted to ask Rich what the difference is between offensive and defensive weapons, and make the comment that as long as we keep defending Israel by sending them weapons for defense and defending their actions against Gaza, we're going to be just as complicit as ever. So I would call for a total ban on any weapons going to Israel.
I think that's very valid, Lon. We have been making the distinction of offensive weapons for the sake of trying to get a more positive response from our members of Congress. It's hard to argue that the Iron Guard defensive weapons aren't preventing more killing. So that's why we've centered on offensive weapons. But it's interesting. I'm United Methodist, and for decades, we have called for no military aid to any country in the Middle East. That's the safest. No military aid of any kind. to any country in the Middle East.
One of my questions, I guess, Rich, was if there was supposed to be money in this bill that's to be voted on this afternoon. I think it was around $8 billion supposed to be for humanitarian aid. And that's what really concerns me, is that what's going to happen to those families who are living in Gaza, who they're not politicians. They're just simply in trying to survive. And so I'm just wondering, is there any chance that there could be that humanitarian aid that was sort of slipped into money for Israel could be earmarked, even though it wasn't, they were not going to include money for this UN organization that was trying to provide specific aid to the Gaza people, the refugees.
I don't think that Israel would do that, and I don't think any amendment to include humanitarian aid for Gaza is going to get the light of day. The Speaker, Mike Johnson, has got a plan. He's risking his speakership to do this, and he's got some Democrats who are going along. I'm guessing by this afternoon, the House will pass all of this, and the Senate will go right ahead, and President Biden will sign it in the next 24 or 48 hours. It's a runaway train, I'm afraid.
Okay, any other comments? I see Dave's hand up.
Well, to me, October 7th just allowed the right-wing reactionary government in Israel to wage war on the Palestinians. In the months since the war started, since October 7th, settlements have been invaded on the Palestinian side by Israeli settlers, and there's something that to me, I want to see the war stopped, but we need to start a two-state solution. That's the only way we can get anywhere. We've got to realize, stop the Israelis. I mean, this actually, October 7th, was a really dumb move for the other side, because quite frankly, it allowed Bibi and his right-wing, absolutely reactionary people to run the country into the ground.
Any other comments about this crazy situation, or the terrible situation, really?
Yes, Dave, I think this is a brutal war on Gaza, and the West Bank people have been getting more jailed and killed as well. And we can't overlook the fact that Israeli leaders have made genocidal speeches, like there are no innocent civilians in Gaza, or vowing to eliminate everything in Gaza, or saying that the Nakba of this year will overshadow the Nakba of 1948. So if you think it was bad in 1948, where they ethnically cleansed some 750,000 Arabs from Palestine, this Nakba will be worse. And the most distressing part has been the abuse of the Bible by Netanyahu to cast this as a biblical war, that God wants the Palestinians to be annihilated. God wanted the Amaleks to be annihilated, and King Saul and the Israelis didn't do that, and God was mad about that. And that's Netanyahu's viewpoint, that God wants the Palestinians annihilated, and it's just a total abuse of religion to have this kind of attitude and policy. So I kind of piled on your idea, Dave, that this is a brutal war.
So we as a group can take a position on this, and we could also have it as a further discussion during our board meeting, but I guess I would be open to entertaining a motion if someone at this point would like to say that Gray Panthers should take a position on this very challenging issue. Or should we kind of let this sit in our minds and talk more about it during our board meeting after this afternoon? So I guess I'm hearing no one's saying take a position now, but I mean, you as a group can do that by our bylaws. You doesn't have to be a decision by our board to take a stand on an issue. So Lon?
Yeah, I would move that the Gray Panthers condemns all weapons transfer, weapons sales, or weapons to Israel until they end their war.
Okay. Do we have a second to that motion? Okay, is that
I would not second it, but I would go back to was it the Methodist to say all sales to the Middle East. All weapons sales to the Middle East. If that would be a friendly amendment, Lon.
Actually, I prefer making it direct to Israel because, I mean, it's not that I don't support your position, and we could expand my motion to say, stop all weapons sales in the Middle East and to Israel, or to say, and all we condemn sending weapons to Israel and or any other country in the Middle East. I'd be willing to include that, what you said, into my original proposal.
okay? So I guess we have an amended motion based on what Lon has said. Do we have a second to that motion? This is where Gray Panthers get a little bit gutsy here, but we have that we have that right to take.
I would second it. I would second it.
Okay, so Gary again seconds the motion. Okay, we're ready. Are we ready for a vote, or do we need more discussion? And if we want to repeat, do you want to, Lon, repeat the motion for us?
Yeah, the motion is that Gray Panthers condemns weapons sales to Israel and any other countries in the Middle East.
And that was Ben seconded. Okay, are we ready for a vote? Those in favor, raise your hand or give some other sign to that effect. Okay.
Aye.
Okay, anyone who's opposed to that motion by the same sign? So we've got, what is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 9 to 1. So the motion carries. So we'll be taking a position on that. So not so many groups are doing this these days. So I guess thank you all for your courage and your thoughtfulness.
Yes, thank you very much. Good job.
Okay. Yeah, let's move on here now to Social Security, which it's something, an area that I've done quite a bit of research on lately. But Dave, I can add to whatever you might say, in terms of your perspectives on what's happening with Social Security.
Well, I get Danny's quite up on it too, but the reality is that I have been reporting on Social Security for a while, but this is the first time I'm really concerned about what used to be our Republican friends are doing. They're not anymore. 100% of the Republican leadership is supportive of making drastic cuts to Social Security, and 80% of all Republicans are in support of it, and that includes $1.5 trillion in Social Security cuts, a raising retirement age to 69, and what did I do? And cutting disability benefits, which will affect, very often the least of us. So that includes Medicare and other premiums will go out, and one of the more dramatic things that really, I mean, I don't understand how Republicans can do this. They want to repeal the $35 maximum for diabetes medicine, for insulin, and I mean it's something that I've given a report, and I've given a report with an awful lot of enthusiasm, because I figured the radical, crazy Republicans would never get any of this through. But it is looking like we really have to be aware of what's going on. It's just it's something. I'm trying to think what else I'm missing here. They want to increase defense spending and cut 30% of our non-defense spending, and that's to cripple all of our programs, whether any kind of assistance to the least of us, and it's to help the billionaires and the millionaires, and that's all there is to it. I'm sure Randy or Danny have got more to say, but again, this is the first Social Security report I've given with enthusiasm. It's scary. It's scary.
Too soon.
So Danny, did you want to also add anything to this? Because it was one of those times when both Danny and I kind of came out with an action alert or a call for action on the same topic. I'm at one end of the age spectrum and Danny's on the other end. But Danny, what do you want to share about how your concerns about Social Security?
Yeah, so my thing is that part of my generation, I'm part of Generation Z, and millennials are starting to slowly grasp the idea that it might be gone by the time we are to retirement age. And I've always heard, oh, you don't have to worry about it when you're young. Like that's a later problem. That's something it'll be fine. It'll work out. But it's with all of the discussions and the talks, it's starting to become really real for our younger generations and the people just now entering the workforce. So I think it's super important to start using an intergenerational lens when talking about Social Security, and how it doesn't just impact people that are already retired or are near retiring age, but those who are 18, 19, and 20 just starting to work and have a long way to go before they get to retire. So starting to use that intergenerational lens, I think, is going to be super important to the fight to keep Social Security around, and to make the point of why it's important to not make cuts or start changing limits and things like that.
Thank you. And I want to just say also that was an important addition to what Gray Panthers have always had this for the last 30, 40 years that I've been involved with Gray Panthers. They've had the mantra that we need to lift the cap on how much, on who all pays for Social Security, pays into with a payroll tax. And so now there are two different proposals that are in Congress right now. One was introduced by Bernie Sanders that would actually, there's 10 more years in which Social Security will be able to sustain the current payment rates. And at that point, in about 10 years from now, if something isn't done to protect Social Security, that everyone would get a cutback of 20% in their Social Security amounts. So clearly there's a threat to everyone on Social Security if something isn't done to protect it for future generation, for the current and future generations. And so there's a commission, so the Republicans had a commission is established in the the House is what was Dave was talking about, that was proposing that there be that there would be reductions in that the kind of proposals that I think if Dave was talking about to raise the age to 69 to and to make cuts in disability, but there are two different proposals. Instead of just saving Social Security by cutting benefits for everyone, which is there's two different proposals that are at least two that are kind of getting attention. And the National Gray Panthers worked with a group called Social Security Works. It's a progressive group that has a large coalition of people behind it, organizations. And so they're saying that we should support Bernie Sanders' bill that would extend the life of Social Security by 75 years. In other words, when Danny gets to be older, as old as I am, or maybe even Danny's no longer on Earth, that Social Security would still be there under this proposal. And what it would do is to be able to lift that cap on not only Social Security payroll tax, but also to be able to increase the amount of money that people pay out of their profits. The money that people would be, the corporations, of course, would have to match some of those things going up. So everyone, no one, just like Medicare right now, there's no limit on how much payroll tax is done to protect Medicare. That same kind of thing should be done for Social Security. Then there's also a bill by Representative John Larson, who's Senate, the Social Security 2100 Act. So that bill would extend the life of Social Security 32 years, but it has a similar kind of plan that we expand, having other people to the higher income people. Some of this commission that was talked about was wanting to be able not only to be able to not only to make cuts to Social Security, but to give some major tax breaks for the most wealthy people in this country. So in addition to cutting Social Security by $1.5 trillion, think about that. Their goal was to balance the budget in 10 years. And Social Security isn't even considered to be part of the budget. But nevertheless, these bills would offer an alternative to simply cutting Social Security benefits to protecting it. It would be offering to say expand the responsibilities for all people to pay into. We had like the 15th of this month was considered to be tax day when everybody's supposed to pay their taxes. So we had a national alert that went out to send on this day that wealthy people and corporations should be paying into Social Security on tax day, not just the folks in the lower and middle income people. So that's my update on Social Security. We're really taking some action at the national level, and it's now where we have to do education of members of Congress that this isn't just another game that's being played, but in an election year, the Republicans can't afford to say, well, we're going to cut Social Security, but that's big power that we have now. But we also need to be able to have that power to say we need to do something positive to protect Social Security for future generations. So that's my long drawn out report on what we're trying to do with Social Security, and wanted you to know that we were taking those positions at the national level, and ask if you have any questions or comments.
It's kind of interesting that, what is it, a week after the president's State of the Union address, where he talked about how Republicans plan on messing with your Social Security, and he got booed for it, the Republican plan came out. So it was no coincidence that he knew about it ahead of time. That is something that I don't think most Americans are still listening to that.
Yeah, it was President Biden. It was one of the more articulate people, and it's in his self-interest, of course, because he wants to get reelected. But he had a whole specific listing of how these commissions were talking about Social Security as a way to be able to balance the budget on the backs of people who get Social Security. So Biden has been out there, and maybe it's his self-interest, but it's also saying, look, this is the big picture, is it who benefits and who loses. So there you go. Okay. Any other comments on Social Security? Now we got this afternoon, I happen to live in Royal Oak, and many of you know exactly where it is. But we normally would have somebody from the Sierra Club would give an update on what's happening with the environment. And that person couldn't be here because they're doing a lot of activities here at the Royal Oak Farmers Market, where they're going to be having a march. This is part of an Earth Day celebration, standing up for the earth and protecting our environment. And so they'll be having a march at 3 o'clock. For those of you who have something a little extra time this afternoon, there is a march at 3 o'clock at the Royal Oak Farmers Market, and then they'll be having a climate fair from 4 to 7 p.m. inside of the Royal Oak Farmers Market. So there's other groups that are part of this. It's not just the Sierra Club. Are there people on the call here that wanted to add some things in? I know that, Lon, you've been involved with environmental justice over the years as well. Are there people that would like to offer comments or suggestions about the issues or what people should be doing on the environment? This is an open session. I don't have a speaker to give you all the answers here.
Yeah, actually, I'm up at my cottage right now, so I have heard about what's going on, but I haven't really, since I was planning on coming up to open my cottage, I'm not going to that. Although it sounded like a pretty good event.
Well, I'll just, anyone else want to say anything about what their concerns are about the environment? At the national level, there was concern that I've got an environmental activist from Florida that regularly reports on what's going on. And of course, they have a little bit different climate down there than we do. But he's kind of concerned about how this change in climate, like we're having this spring, you're either having summer or you're having winter all in the course of 1 week, things that never happened when I was growing up. And so there's a reason why we're having this big fluctuations in our weather. And so he's saying, this is not necessarily the solution, but he's saying that he's concerned about the climate change affecting our air and the water we drink, and even the food that we eat is affected by our climate change. So those are food for thought, but I'd like to hear more what he's going to tell us here within a week from Monday. But again, I'm just opening this up here if there's issues of my statewide organization. Yeah, Gary?
I'd like to bring one up that's closer to home. And that is that the state of Michigan's permitting process in terms of utilizing lands that have already been identified as fragile or necessary to the environment, that process to take that kind of land and turn it into another type of land that can be used for, say, commercial purposes is really broken now in the state, and particularly I would say it's throughout the state, but it's examples are right now in Wayne County and Oakland County. And so it's something that's driven by the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, called EGLE. And what happens is a permit request is made by a private company, and it goes through a local county-based environmental board, and then it is forwarded to EGLE. And EGLE essentially approves 97% of the permits that are proposed. And most recently, there's an article in Planet Detroit right now that just came out, I believe, in the last 2 days, that talked about one of the most fragile pieces of environmental land in Wayne County. And it happens to be adjacent to one of land management's massive garbage dumps. And they are petitioning to change the status of that small little piece of land so they can expand the dump. And it was automatically approved. And it turns out that the legal court challenge to that kind of a decision is actually made by another wing of EGLE, which automatically overturned that request to stay that action. And so that is of great concern, as it turns out that in just traveling around the state in the last 2 weeks, I've heard other examples from residents in northern Michigan who are seeing laws that would have been enforced in the environmental arena around local landowner actions no longer being taken into account. And so there are all kinds of folks making changes to environmental space that they wouldn't have been able to do 20 years ago when enforcement was much more in place around environmental issues in Michigan. So I know there are these giant big ticket items that people are thinking about, of course, but what's going on under our feet is the sand is just slipping away. So I would like to just raise that. There's no particular action I want to make other than to suggest that people might want to look at Planet Detroit. And Lon may have some insight into this. But the article that's written by Evan Rosen on this topic. So I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you. Anybody else want to offer a comment or a question or a concern related to the environment? We're dealing with some pretty heavy stuff today, aren't we?
I guess from my end, thank you for that, Gary. I think we need to encourage the state to be more directly involved in this. Sometimes communities are being bought off by agencies, and sometimes the communities selfishly want to protect their whatever be farmland or whatever it is. But if we're going to be environmentally safe and get rid of fossil fuel where we can, we need to have more like wind farms and solar farms. And this, if the state was more directly involved, it would stop. And I know I'm stepping on some toes here, but some communities just don't want to change. And I think for the national good, for our children and our grandchildren, we have to build these wind farms and solar farms. And I think what Gary's pointing to is it's something that it's happening all over Michigan, where former wetlands are being made into to agricultural lands where big business, it isn't being done for a nice big yard. It isn't being done for agriculture to grow apple trees. It's being done to broaden industrial business.
Well, it was interesting too. Thank you for sharing that. It's interesting that people from my church are being invited to apply for some funding or to learn about how they could get funding from an Interfaith Power and Light, where they can have the state is offering grants to be able to increase use of solar power within their congregations. Now, this is one niche, let's say, within the whole environment, but somebody in Michigan is trying to offer some dollars there, and I think it has to do with the dollars that came in from the Inflation Reduction Act here a couple of years ago that was passed, that allowed money to be used so that people, without even having to spend lots of money, could have solar panels on their congregation. So it's not just one group, but it's an opportunity that somebody who's at the state level is trying to make solar more affordable. So that's one little bright spot.
Right there. And there's a similar thing that was just as an initiative inside the city of Detroit, where they're looking to set up small solar fields in specific neighborhoods. And those neighborhoods that are adjacent to the solar fields will become eligible for a number of significant energy efficiency items like new furnaces and window casements and things like that. So it's actually got a benefit for the individuals that live in that area, as well as having the solar field to offset some of the carbon footprint. So that is a new initiative. It is coming from the Recovery Act as well, Randy.
Yeah, Inflation Reduction Act.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, Inflation Reduction Act, correct.
Well, we're all in some kind of recovery here when we're going through all these crises, you know. We have a couple more items on the agenda and we only got 5 minutes to go. So we're having a lot of conversation here this morning and I appreciate that too. One of the big things that's on people's minds in my circle is that the election coming up here and this fall. And so Michigan is kind of a key state, one of the key states where it depends on who gets elected and there's a whole lot of dynamics, but if people get discouraged by all these things that are going on, they may not just get out and vote. So I'll just say that my statewide organization, in addition to it's not Gray Panthers, but my statewide Michigan UU Social Justice Network, with help from some people that are smarter and more adept than myself, are getting around 3 different grants to help with protecting the elections and having voter turnout. So I'm going to say that there are some opportunities for those of you who want to, and we're not the only organization. There's a whole coalition of groups called Michigan Voices. So that group is giving out grants now to help with getting voter turn to protect elections, as well as to encourage people to vote. So, and I got a national grant here to get voting activities where we're having phone and text banks. So if you're looking for ways to be able to help support having a good voter turnout here this fall, there are opportunities that are there, and I can point you in the direction of them, but you may know as many as I do anyway. But we'll be having a need for people who would be poll watchers. And so, for example, if there are people who are bad actors who want to disrupt the elections, and I know it's hard to believe that there are bad actors out there, but there are a few of them, then we would be having volunteers that would go to polls and observe how persons who have a disability, for example, how are they going to be, maybe they have a visual impairment, how are they going to be able to vote? Well, they have certain machines, but are people being told about that they can have these access to vote? Or maybe there's somebody that's interfering with the voting. So if you want to be a poll watcher, I got 2 different grants that will be having opportunities to volunteer to do that kind of work. And 2 different grants will also be covering for phone and text banking. So you're reaching out to a large number of people. Maybe it's texting is an ordinary thing for us every day that we get texts from people, but sometimes those texts will make a difference in encouraging us to get and to remind us to get involved and show up for voting. So these are some other opportunities. We're also doing, as part of these grants, doing some education. There's a lot of new voting laws, new voting policies in Michigan. We're fortunate in Michigan compared to states like Texas and Alabama and some of other states like that. We're fortunate that we've got some voting reforms that have happened. We need to know about what our new set of rights are related to voting. So I've got a person that can go out and speak to different groups and has a PowerPoint presentation, will tell you or your groups more about what are your new voting rights? What are the way, how does voting operate in Michigan now that didn't happen 2 or 4 years ago? So these are all some kinds of things that we do. The other dynamic that comes into, maybe this is another dynamic that's sort of related to getting things passed in the legislature that you probably know about because we had presentations on this before, but there was just an election this last Friday in which there was 2 different Democrats that dropped out from there. It's now like technically we're still at a tie in terms of Republicans and Democrats in the Michigan House. But by the end of the next week, it's expected that there will be, I think it's like 52 to 50, something. It's 2 more Democrats that would allow that slim minority of progressive legislators can allow some things to get adopted in Michigan that weren't possible here in the last few weeks or the last 30 years for that matter. So those are some updates related to voting. And I will just say also, since the time is about running out, that I'm very much involved with reproductive justice. And we all know how much women's rights matter to women, but they also matter to elections as well. Women should have a right to choose right to choose what kind of access they have to not only birth control and not only abortions, but access to, just like I think Steve was talking about how things are a lot tougher if you don't have the money. Well, there's a lot of low income Black folks that don't have access to the resources they need to raise healthy, happy children. So there's a whole range of things. And in the Senate last Thursday, just 3 days ago, they passed a bill that expanded access to contraceptives that can now be sold through the pharmacy. You don't have to go to your doctor's office to get contraceptives. And so with that, it's another step, but there's other kinds of things. There's a whole group of people that are working on trying to expand women's access to reproductive resources and to make things affordable. There's a new grants that were coming out to be able to have educational presentations for women in various churches around the state that would allow them to know more about what they need to do. Sometimes it's people just don't know what they need to do to make sure they have a healthy baby in that, and having access to the resources to feed and care for that child before and after they give birth. So those are some updates on some of the issues that I put onto our agenda for today. And that's just a few. I guess I'm going to open it up if there's other things here that people would like. Are there announcements that you all would like to make here before our meeting technically adjourns here in a few minutes?
I think, Randy, from our last meeting, which we talked about in terms the redefining of the voting districts, that our speaker from Voters Not Politicians had talked about endorsing the first judge's, if you recall the presentation, recommendation for redistricting. And apparently that was done, if I understood the news correctly.
Yes.
Was that correct?
Yeah, they adopted. Now voters, they were challenged with their voting plan, and it had to do with some racial issues with the formatting for the districts in southeastern Michigan. But they nevertheless they had come up with an alternative plan, and that alternative plan did and get adopted, and it did include access to another seat for a Republican, perhaps in the Grosse Pointe area, but by and large, it was find out a way to sort of satisfy that there were a number of people in Detroit that felt they were not, that they were being represented. And so there was an adoption of a plan that voters, not politicians, was basically endorsing this revised plan. So there was an adoption of a plan, as you mentioned, Gary, that's a positive thing. Now they'll have to move ahead in going to the Senate, but right now it's everybody in the House is up for election this fall, everybody in the Michigan House. So it's going to be important for people to know what are their districts, where if you're living in a certain place like Oak Park, what are you covered? Which district are you in? Who are you going to vote for? So those are a lot of things yet ahead of people for that. Any other questions or comments? So if not, and I'm going to give also a special thank you to Steve. I don't know if Steve, if you're still on the call, but I see your face, and I'm going to just say thank you for being here. You're probably the first speaker that I can remember for years that actually stayed through our whole meeting. So maybe
thanks.
Maybe we should give Steve another thank you here to just so listening to what we're talking about. So
yeah, I was listening. Thank you.
So we're an unusual group, I think, with Gray Panthers, because we're really aim to be younger and older people working together for justice. So again, thank you, Steve. So I'm going to call this meeting to a close, and then we're going to, those of you who are on the board, and I think the majority of you in this room are on our board, we'll come back in about 5 minutes or so, a little potty break. But thanks, Kaya, for being here with, and you're more than welcome to sit in on this, our board meeting too.